During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Witten Island when I was about 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Witten Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my mind which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rested in Pennsylvania, and so on and so forth. But there was one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they just happened yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know they truly did happen. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Iceland, Marine, with the population of 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we rested there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended only by my parents, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had monotosis, whence meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was a horrible time to be bedridden, as we were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania. Most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother bought me ginger ale and several books many times a day, and these served as a fraction of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and enjoy my misery. Now, I don't exactly recall how I met Mr.WideMouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with Mona. My first memory of the small creature was asking if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr.WideMouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears. But his mouth was by far the largest. "You look like a phobie," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. WideMouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Phobie? What is a phobie?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, a toy. The little robot with the big ears. You can pet it and feed it, almost like a real pet." Oh. Mr. WideMouth resumed his activity. "You need one of those. They aren't the same thing as having a real friend." I remember Mr. WideMouth always disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check in on me. "I lay on your bed," he then explains. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We did do much during those first few days. Mr. WideMouth looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they conveyed. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until your mother comes in to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. WideMouth slipped out from under my bed and tugged at my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. WideMouth was persistent until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite to the doorway. Mr. WideMouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out the ground floor. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill. And from this angle, the drop was further than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. WideMouth explained. "I pretend that there is a big soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. And if you pretend hard enough, you bounce right back up like a feather. I want you to try it." I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's all part of fun of it. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you might as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce right back up to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the logical side of me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I had enough imagination. I could get hurt real bad." Mr. WideMouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anal gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. WideMouth arrived holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box. In the box, there were a bunch of knives. "My parents will kill me," I shouted, horrified that Mr. WideMouth had brought knives into my room. Objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. "I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. WideMouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it." I pushed the box away from me. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air like that." Mr. WideMouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. WideMouth even often woke me up at night, saying that he put a real trampoline in the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep. Mr. WideMouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. It wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my bed for so long. Excited, I put on my slippers and ran out to the back porch, yawning for the feeling of sun on my face once again. Mr. WideMouth was waiting for me. "I have something to show you," he said. I must have gave him a confused look because he said next, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I had lots of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day, I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond the trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. WideMouth, the last load of all things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of the truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. WideMouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he had said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret from him. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to win a marathon, rather than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "All enough for you, kiddo?" he said. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends. For real this time." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. WideMouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn into the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, with a steak knife in his hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Viceland. The place of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. WideMouth had showed me. A part of me expected him to jump out from behind the stairs, scaring the living hell out of me. But I felt that Mr. WideMouth was gone now, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Viceland Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that most of the tombstones belonged to children.